My name is Kristen Bradham. I am what's called an applications administrator at UCSC, which basically means I don't write. I used to be a developer. I used to write the code, but I don't write the code anymore. Now I just keep it running. And I keep the sysadmin running too. Yeah, sorry. What is AWS? AWS, it's the new hotness, right? Everybody's talking about it. Whoa, AWS, we're all doing it. We're all moving to the cloud. UCSC is moving almost all of its services to the cloud right now. To AWS. So we have a lot of experience. We're ahead of the curve of the other UCs on that. We're finding it's really, really a great platform for doing our systems administration. So cloud computing, and what's this is basically you're running your servers in the cloud. Cloud storage, if you've done NFS or AFS or any of that stuff, like this is going to replace that for you in your file systems, your file folders, databases. And then again, suddenly because they built this really robust AWS infrastructure, people started doing this thing called serverless applications. And I'll just talk about what that is at the end. Just this whole talk is just supposed to sort of get you knowing the keywords. You're gonna have to go look up everything afterwards, right? But I go through a lot of keywords in my talks. So it's IT in the cloud, right? Like we used to have the IT person and they would do stuff. So just to look really quickly, like what a lot of us, like I've been doing this since 1998, a traditional hosting system, on the operating system, the host chooses, right? Then we kind of went to this whole virtual machine paradigm where you could have a server as part of another machine. You didn't have a physical machine, right? And now AWS, you can choose just everything. The big difference though is when we get to number 3, reproducible. So VMware, traditional hosting, no. You put your stuff up there, it was there, if it died, you're out of luck. Right? VMware suddenly, well, okay, they would have some backups, some snapshots. If you died, you'd have a backup. AWS, you're actually tearing up and building down these servers constantly on the fly with code. So it's a much different way of hosting than we did in the past, where we had these physical servers that we were putting stuff on. Now I write a little code, it spins up a server. That fails, or it costs too much, or we just don't need it for right now, and it dies, and I wait until I need it again and I spin another one up. So AWS has really shifted how we do hosting. Scalability, again, traditional VMs, traditional hosting, you had to kind of say, like, I actually was in this position recently, that we had admissions go out. And so when we sent out our admissions letters, our website got hit really hard by every single kid looking at it on their phone, right? Like, did I get in, did I get in, did I get in, did I get in? And that was actually a big peak for that site. So we had to anticipate that and grow our server before that happened. With AWS, we have what's called auto scaling. So instead I just say, hey, if you're getting hit a lot, spin up another server. We're doing it on the fly on an as-needed basis, and that brings our costs down. So we can handle those spikes a lot better than we used to be able to. Another really great thing about AWS is identity and access management. Again, you all know the IT person who has the root password, right? Like that's like super important. AWS you can really get very, very fine with your permissions, what you're allowing people to do and not do. And that's a huge difference in traditional hosting and current hosting. Serverless computing. You don't even have to have a server to do stuff on AWS. And that's a huge paradigm shift. And we'll talk about that a little bit. And in fact, the first thing I'm going to show you is how to just host a website, a static website, just on a file server, just in the cloud. You don't need to know anything. So AWS is freaking huge. This is actually the mega menu that if you go roll over their services, it's got over 100 services in it. Nobody knows them all. I've been doing this for quite some time. Like, I don't know them all. There's no way. So instead we play what we call AWS bingo, okay? So as you need a service, as you're your requirements grow, you want to go and learn these different things. You can't, one sysadmin or applications admin or whoever can't know them all. So it's kind of more like knowing about them, and then when you need that service, you can go and get it. What we're going to look at today are the main services of AWS and the core of AWS, and that's two things, S3 and E2. We're also going to look at CloudFormation and Elastic Beanstalk, which are kind of some codey ways to manipulate these things. But S3, that's your files. E2, those are your servers, okay? The use case, the first use case I have is we're going to just build a static site. No PHP, just an HTML site. Might have some client-side JavaScript, right? Like you're going to put up your jQuery and it's going to do that. But we can host this without a server, without anything. We're just going to put it in an S3 bucket and set the permissions. Before we start, just so you guys know, I had to create an account and give that account full access. When you go in and you're like, hey, I'm going to get started on AWS, I'm going to go make my own little account. It's totally free to make an account, by the way. You pay for the services that you use. You want to make sure you make yourself this is a huge security reason, which is why it's the beginning of my talk. Make sure you make yourself an additional account you're not logging in as the root user. Okay, don't get ever used to logging in as the root user. You really only want to do that when everything catastrophically has gone to hell, and then you can log in as the root user and fix things. But on a day-to-day basis, when you're just creating, you can give another user almost root access, and that's what my user is going to have. So to create a site, we're going to create a bucket. We're going to upload the HTML files. We're going to set the permissions for static website hosting, and then we're going to see the site. I put these into the slides, but I actually, let's see, I think it would be more fun to just do it. So let's go ahead and go. And here I am, and this is my AWS console. They always tell us when we're presenting not to rely on being able to do live demos like this, but I like doing them because I think it's fun to have people like actually see what we're gonna do. So remember when I went in and I said, this is actually that mega menu of all the things that you can go in and do. But we're gonna just put something up in a bucket out there in the world. I have created, you can see I actually have a couple of other buckets. Buckets are kind of like directories, but they're like directories plus. They can have permissions and do things as well. So they're sort of like directories, but they have, there's a reason that they're not called directories. They're their own special thing. So we're gonna just go ahead and create a bucket. What should we call this? We should call it Stanford, give me a funny word. Let me get a funny word. Like unicorn, or it's gotta be a unique name, so. Unicorn, okay, Stanford Unicorn. We're gonna make the Stanford Unicorn site. One of the important things is you know which region you're doing things in, and we're in US East, Ohio. If you're in a different region, you're not gonna see any of your stuff and you're gonna be like, what's going on? But, so we're gonna put this in, we're gonna put it a little closer to us. So we're gonna put it in North California. And then we're just gonna hit next. We're gonna, there's a bunch of different things. Again, a bucket's not a directory. You can do all these things to it. And you guys can read through this whenever you're feeling like it. For a public website, buckets in AWS are always private because, you know, normally you're putting up stuff and you don't want to share it with the rest of the world, right? But in this case, we want to share it with the rest of the world. So we're gonna unclick that. And that'll make everything public. And we're gonna go ahead and create our bucket. So now I have a new bucket called Stanford Unicorn. And this is, none of this should be super surprising to any of you, right? Like you've all seen the processes like this before. We're gonna add some files. And I actually have these files, which make a tiny little website. Okay, we're gonna upload. And there's my files. Now my files are in the cloud. Hooray! Okay, so, but if we go to this, it will actually give us an URL for where we can see that file. But when we click on that, it doesn't really give us the file. It gives us some information about the file, but this isn't a hosted website, right? This is just some information about a file. in AWS, you might be using these storage buckets to do all sorts of things. They might be your logs, they might be an application, they might be something you want to protect. So it always defaults to protecting everything. But we are going to go in and give this properties, and here, this is where, oops, sorry, I need to go we're going to go in and we're going to go to the properties. No, I keep doing this wrong. Sorry. We're going to go in here and we're going to go to the properties. There we go. And we're going to say this is a static website. And we're going to just say, yep, use this. I call these things. And where's the save? We're going to save. And voila. Let's go take a look again at my page. Let's see what happened. Oh, no, still not right, because actually we have to set the permissions on every single file too. And this is, again, they're trying to protect us from ourselves. They're trying to protect us from making things public that we really don't want to be making public. So, but we want to make these public. So we're going to go to properties here, or permissions, and we're going to say public access everyone. And we're going to do that on each file. Now, you can do this with code. You do not have to go in. Everything I'm doing here, you can do on the command line, okay? You can, if you just type AWS CLI, and all of this you can do with the command line. It's just not very interesting to watch me type command line things in a presentation. So let's see, we got index, we got that one, and I think we got to do this one too. This is my free account. I don't pay for any of this. They give you a certain amount of S3 bucket. They give you a certain amount of computing power for free every month. If you turn on a server and leave it on all month, it's going to cost you about 20 bucks. Turning on and off servers is really, really easy. So you can go in and play and just remember to turn off everything that you did. I've forgotten things, like I've forgotten a key before and they charge me like $1, you know, so you do have to put in a credit card and it can cost you money. But if you're it kind of lets you know too. It says, hey, this is going to cost you money. Are you sure? Because they don't want you racking up $3,000 that you can't pay. That's not they're making plenty of money. They don't need our money. Yes. Yeah, all of this is totally free. So, okay, so my permissions are not working. Why am I not saving this correctly? Oh, because I'm not giving them. I didn't give them the actual permissions. Sorry about that. So watching me clicky is probably not that much fun either, but let's try this. You can, so I actually have another folder where you basically just put in a little bit of properties and then it does make everything in the folder public. It's real simple, but it's out of the scope of what I'm doing right now. Yeah, go ahead.
I've heard people like self-serving or something.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Are there advantages to do this versus like
the advantage, so a Raspberry Pi, the thing is you got to keep that thing, the lights on. I mean, that's the only difference, right? This AWS is going to keep the lights on for you, and they're just going to make, if it goes down, they're going to make sure that you know, and all those things. So it's the difference between having a, you know, physical piece of hardware versus something that a whole, you know, this is being like millions of people all over the world use this. So, so let me just get the kids here so that you can actually see the picture, because that's important. Sorry, permissions. And that's it. That's all we have to do in order to serve a quote unquote website, is put our stuff up, and then we go and take a look at it. So that's kind of cool, right? I mean, but we've been able to do that, right, since traditional website hosting. You just FTP it up and then, okay, there it is, right? Except that when you really get down into AWS, you get down into this costs much, much less than putting these things on a server. So if you're not using them very much and you have a large organization, doing your file system storage this way is going to just cost you, or it's going to just save you a ton of money, because you're not paying for things you're not using. So you're not paying for all the processing power to be running a file server and running all these other things. And it doesn't sound like much now, but when you get down, when you really start working in this, like S3 buckets, it's really a core part of what happens. And it's a core part of what happens with the serverless technology is we put these things up, and then we basically, you put up like a PHP, you put up your PHP code in this way where it's just a file sitting on a server somewhere that doesn't run PHP. And then you tell it to go and run it and send it back. And you don't have to maintain a machine at all. Amazon Web Services, the thing will run the PHP for you on their huge monumental service thing. And so it's super fast. So that's what we taught, that when you hear people say serverless, what they mean is they're putting things into S3 buckets, okay? So this is where this is the simplest thing, and then it goes into the most hot newness, right? It's the simplest thing, but this is where when people are saying serverless, they're putting their things into S3 buckets, and then they're using something called Lambda to run the actual code. So that's a huge, that would be weeks of tutorials in order to teach you guys how to do that. So that's not part of this this talk today, but that's what they mean when they say serverless. So S3 is really one of those main core things in AWS. So here are the slides, because again, just in case I didn't have internet access, we created a bucket, we uploaded our HTML files, we set the permissions for static web hosting on the bucket, and then we visited the files. So, sorry, what's my time like? Does anybody know what time it is? 11:17. Okay, I talk really fast. I'm sorry, guys, but that's what we do. So, so that's one of the main core things, is that S3 bucket. So when you're getting started with AWS, you're gonna hear the people that talk about AWS, S3, 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 and you can just know that's just where the files are. It's just a file system. That's all it is, right? But let's say, you know, we're Drupal. This is while it's a web camp this year, it's a Drupal camp, right? Or a lot of people use Drupal. So what if we do want that LAMP stack, right? What if we want to be able to host on our LAMP stack, okay? Then we want to do, we want to run PHP. We want to have our own server. We want to log in as root. We want to just be able to do all of that, right? In that case, we're going to use what's called EC2. And EC2 is when, is what we talk about when we talk about creating resources that are basically, they're servers and all the resources you need in order to run servers, right? Like what we would have traditionally called a server or a VM server, or, you know, a machine or whatever. So that's what we're going to do next. So again, before I did this, I created a key pair because that's something that that this needs in order to run the encryption. Again, if you go out and do a tutorial on how to create a CloudFormation EC2 instance, CloudFormation is the code. The CloudFormation is the code I'm going to use in order to create the server. Okay, so that's how we're doing things now. We don't turn on a server and then put in the disk and then install the OS and then type yum update, and you know, like instead we're kind of using a piece of code to do all of that for us, and that's CloudFormation. But EC2 is kind of what, as you're all kind of newbies and getting started with it, EC2 is the computing part. Okay. So I created a key pair. All we're going to do is we're going to create a CloudFormation stack, and I'll show you what that is. That's the code that's going to create all of my resources for me. It's going to create my server for me. We're going to fill out the details, and then voila, we're going to have a LAMP stack site running. Now, how many of you have a local LAMP stack running on your computer? Do any of you guys do that? Yeah, are you developers? Yeah. So you know, like you had to go get LAMP or WAMP and install it. And then there's always something with a PHP and init file. And then there's, you know, like there's like all these, like MySQL needs a certain package to run. So you got to go install that. And, you know, it's not easy, right? Except AWS, because they're Amazon and they're running so many web services anyways, they just kind of created all this. They didn't actually create this. I think this is an interesting story. They didn't actually create this to be a business. They created it because they needed it because they were using so many web services. And then they said, well, we'll let other people, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. So yeah, that's, you know, I love developers who make things easier. So, okay, so let's go in. Let's create a LAMP stack. Okay, so again, we're gonna go in and we're gonna use this thing called CloudFormation. And CloudFormation is just a template. It's just, you can use JSON or YAML. Again, everybody in here is probably pretty familiar with a JSON or a YAML file. And that JSON or YAML file is going to create a server. So this is one I created last night. I just left it running so that we could take a look at it. Here's the template that creates this server. So this template is a standard template that I just borrowed from AWS. They provide this as part of this service. And you can see things like, and all this template does is it has a couple of parts. The first part is parameters, and that's gonna ask me for all the information that it needs in order to make this unique. And we'll see, it's gonna just kind of make like a little form GUI for me. These are the mappings. So in that form GUI, if I choose this, they mean this. If I choose this, they mean this. That's not super exciting. Then it's going to create resources. We're going to create a web server instance. And then we're also going to create, and this is all the things that are going to happen. I can install packages here. So remember how I said like, oh, I need SQL, and then SQL needs this other package, and PHP needs this other package, and I got to delete it. We're going to do it all right here. This is an example one, so it's actually going to make an index.php file, and here's the content of that. And any of you who know PHP, I'm pretty sure somewhere in here it's got a PHP info. Yeah, there it is. PHP info. Okay, so that's the page that we're going to see to know that our LAMP stack is running. We're going to see the PHP info page. Again, very common whenever we're making a server. That's like the first thing you do. Does my PHP info work? What PHP am I running? What am I doing? And it's going to then it's going to configure a bunch of other, set the MySQL password to the things it asked us before, and do a bunch of other stuff. And it's just going to create a nice, beautiful little resource for us. So again, in here, we can go in and we'll see the resources that it's created. And remember I said EC2 is the server itself. So web server instance right here, if I click on that, this is what it looks like when you're kind of looking at a server. You can see EC2 dashboard instances. Here's my server. Here's the public DNS for my server, the public IP for my server, the private, because AWS, you can do things just inside private subnets and be very, very secure. And there's a bunch of things, these security groups open and close ports for me. And this is the snapshot of the OS that I used and all that. So if I just go to, here's this public DNS, here's the server that was created. Okay, so let's make one, because that's, okay, Kristen explained it, but let's actually do it. So I go in, and here I am in CloudFormation, and I say create a stack. Now, my job all day, every day is to come in here and make these templates. Just so you guys know, like that's what I do with my time. But AWS makes it even simpler. They have these templates ready, and look at that. I want a LAMP stack. Do I want a Ruby's on Rail, WordPress blog, you know, whatever I want, I can just go in here and go clicky, clicky, make that for me. So I'm going to make a LAMP stack. And I'm going to call this Stanford Unicorn. Now it's going to ask me for, again, you know, this is if you're all installed Drupal before, what's your database? We're going to call it my database. And we're going to just use, because we're going to just blow this away, so it doesn't really matter. Instance type, this is how big do I want my server. We're gonna make a tiny one because again, you pay for things, but there's ways to say if that instance type isn't working, you can do something called elastic, and it'll throw on another instance, or it'll grow the instance, however you want. And then this is the key. I told you I made a key for this so that the encryption could work. You can, there's all these things, and again, if you're interested, these all have all kinds of, AWS is giant, that giant mega menu, like they do things with all those other services, right? But sometimes you just kind of click, AWS is kind of fun because you can kind of just click through and voila, we're creating a stack. So this is going to create a server. It's going to create what's called a security group to tell me what can go in and out of that server. And if I wanted to throw Drupal on it, I could also put all my Drupal install into an S3 bucket and then pull the S3 bucket in. So just kind of saying remember the S3 buckets? Like that's what everybody does. So we'll come back because this takes a minute. So voila, yay. And here we've made a static website. We've created a LAMP stack. That was way easier than doing it on your local, right? Yeah, I love AWS. And so again, here, I just went through this just in case. Fill out the details, and then we'll visit the site. We're gonna do that in a second because it does take like 5 minutes. It takes 5 minutes for it to create a server. When you're doing this thousands of times a day, that can get really tedious, to be totally honest with you. So so I threw on a bonus use case here. Again, we're good for time, right? Like I'm only at like 30 after or something, right? Yeah, okay. A bonus use case. So what I have shown you is the fastest, easiest way to go from a traditional hosting situation to AWS, right? It really maps one-to-one. Here's your file system. Here's your server, right? Like this is a very comfortable space for all of us who have been doing this for a really long time. But AWS kind of throws it out there and goes further and makes much smaller things that allow developers to have spaces on here without having to have a full LAMP stack, without having to have even all of that. So one of the ways that it does that is this thing called Elastic Beanstalk. And what Elastic Beanstalk does is you put the application up. So you put the Drupal site up, and then AWS just figures out the rest for you. And that might be scary if you're the kind of person who's really used to having your own server. But if you're the kind of person who's really used to having an IT department, this is awesome because AWS is just going to do it for us. So let's go ahead and we're going to just look at Elastic Beanstalk. And we're going to go, you know what? I'm going to create an Elastic Beanstalk space. And we're going to call this Stanford Narwhal. And let's see, what platform do we want? Oh, do we want a Docker container? Is it Node? Is it PHP? I'm gonna just say PHP. And I'm going to use a sample application, but you could upload your Drupal site here, okay? I'm going to create an application. Again, this is a shift, right? That we're used to having this server and we put our stuff on our server. It's our server and we do our stuff in it. This is like, instead of putting our stuff in our server, we're going to just put up the application and let AWS figure it out. So let's go see, this is now running, and I gotta remember how to do this, sorry. And oh, we're still creating that. Okay, so while we're still creating that, let's go back and look at our CloudFormation and see if our servers are ready over there. Oh, it's create in progress. Oh, so this is my Elastic Beanstalk. You can see it's using CloudFormation to do the Elastic Beanstalk for me. So I didn't even have to know about CloudFormation. I just go into Elastic Beanstalk and say, go do that. But Stanford Unicorn is working. And so we're going to go into resources. We're going to take a look at the server right here. And you see how this gets complicated really fast. They make these really great base tools, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, where am I? I'm super lost. And here is our new Stanford Unicorn PHP LAMP stack that if we put things in, you know, we can log into the server and put our stuff up and it'll just run our LAMP stack for us. So, but I don't want to be running all these because it is free to run it a little bit, but I don't want to run too much. So I'm just going to delete my resource. I'm just going to delete this. And I'm like, you know, I created this server and I don't really like it. And so I'm just going to delete it. So, and that's what, and we can automate that process with Lambda. We can automate that process with elastic computing. There's all these ways to automate that process of give me another server, take it away. Oh, that one failed, make another one. Put a load balancer in front of it. Like that used to be something that we have to use another server for. Now you just go load balancer, click, or load, you know, AWS create instance, create load balancer, you know, however you want to do it. So it's pretty nifty. So let's go back to Elastic Beanstalk and see how now our application is there. And we can see all these things about our application. It's a PHP application. It's okay. It's doing all right. Let's go and take a look at configuration. Oh, here's the software. It's got rotate logs going. Okay, instances, capacity, my load balancer. Oh, it doesn't have a load balancer. Okay. Let's say I want to update it, then I can go in and update it. I want to create alarms. Oh, tell me when it does this or that. So this is even one level abstracted from even knowing how to make the EC2 server or anything yourself. You just put your application up there, and here it is right here at the top. Here's it. They make a, they made it this, you know, I didn't make this. But this is like, hey, this is your application. So you would just replace this application with your application. You don't even need to know anything about service at all. You can just throw up Elastic Beanstalk. And that's really good for sandboxing and like, oh, I'm going to try something. And then you can, let's say you're like, well, I really don't have a lot of money this month. So I don't want this thing running. We can just stop the application or delete it. And so making these things, it's just so fast, you know. And here even they say, if you want to use a command line to create, manage, and scale your Elastic, use the Elastic Beanstalk command line interface. It has its own command line interface. So once you get in there, you can do all it, you know, it's just like any other server. You can just do all your things. So how is it different? Right. So CloudFormation, you are making a server, and then let's say you want that server not only to run PHP, but you also want it to run Python, and you want it to run, and you want to have your special logging tool on there that nobody else uses because you're futzy, you know. You have a server, just like you would have a VM server. It's almost, its analog is that physical machine. Elastic Beanstalk is just a part of that. It's like just your application. It's like having that IT department do all of that for you. So you don't go in and put PHP on there. Elastic Beanstalk's going to do that for you. It's just like, if you don't want to deal with any of that, if you're not a sysadmin and you don't have a sysadmin and you don't want to deal with it and you're like, I just want all the defaults, then you can do Elastic Beanstalk. It also helps you do things like do different layers of your application. Like, let's say you have one part of your application that's a messaging service and you have one part of your application that's a shopping service. You can have them in two different Elastic Beanstalks. They're not running on the same server, but they're running on the same system. But Amazon is managing the whole thing for you. You're not managing the machines yourself. CloudFormation, you're managing the machine yourself. You want to have that control over the machine and what's running on it and what the defaults are and all of that. So that's kind of the difference. So they're both using EC2 instances. That's the computing. One is managed by AWS and one is managed by you. So CloudFormation is managed by you, and Elastic Beanstalk is, I don't even want to deal with that. I just want you. AWS, you just do it, right? Which for like a Drupal application, rocking. You're like, it's kind of like having Pantheon or something, right? You're just not dealing with all the IT stuff. You know, you can set up the Elastic Beanstalk. It's a little bit faster to run these up and pull them down. It's about componentizing what you're doing. So, because I'm working in a large university and we have a lot of legacy systems, we tend to use CloudFormation. It's also easier for our staff to understand I have my server that I can do my stuff on. We're trying to move to Elastic Beanstalk. We're trying to move to serverless applications. But, you know, we have, I'm one of about 100 application admins, right? So we have a lot of major enterprise systems.
So I guess if I rephrase my question, if you had a preference between one of them, would you tend to lean toward Elastic so that you don't have to manage that stuff?
If you're starting new, yes, use Elastic Beanstalk. Use a Docker container on Elastic Beanstalk. Get used to that process because that's where we're going. If you are migrating a legacy system, CloudFormation. You're going to be able to recreate your system, but you're going to get the benefits that Amazon has of recreating that system on the fly and elasticizing your computing. So but if you're doing new stuff, if you have a new client and they don't have a site and they just want to go and you're like, then just go run up one of these and make them one of these. And then the flip side is the less proprietary stuff you put on it, the more you get used to working within these Amazon tools. It's just like Docker, right? You can port it then. Like someone says, I don't want to be on Amazon anymore. I want to be on, Microsoft Azure, right? Then suddenly you have a package that can go over there rather than something that's really proprietary, which is CloudFormation, right? Like CloudFormation's like, I need my stuff set up this way, you know. And at the university, we have research. We do have a lot of stuff that's non-standard. So sometimes you're just like, yeah, we're gonna make a couple EC2 instances with a load balancer in front, and yeah, it's not optimal, but it's better than, you know, just being in the data center. And yeah, so but yeah, if you're new, if you're starting a new application, definitely look at not just Elastic Beanstalk, but also just like really go out and research like the serverless stuff. Like that stuff is cool. So and that is really where we're going with a lot of things, especially smaller applications. So cool. But why use AWS? I kind of have gone over a lot of this. This is my roundup. It's faster, it's cheaper, or at least it's highly customizable pricing. You can spend a lot of money on AWS. I think our budget's like $1 million. So, you know, you can spend a lot of money on it. But you create, build, destroy model. Okay, so we're kind of just moving into a different model where like these things aren't they aren't these monolithic things that we make. Instead, they're things that are moving and highly reusable. Infrastructure as code. I cannot tell you. I mean, a lot of my work is just trying to figure out what somebody did 10 years ago on a machine and then trying to document it. And you know, we have a lot of rules and regulations that we have to make sure are followed, and you know, code, you know, if it's all in the code, then you know what's going on your server. They just have more tools. Like this thing has grown. It's huge. It makes billions of dollars a year, and they have every reason to help you be successful on it. They're just making money hand over fist, and they really are the leaders in the cloud world right now. And they all work together. All these things work together. Like, that's crazy that all these things work together. Never before in the history of computer systems have we had this many systems working together. I cannot, it's pretty phenomenal. It's pretty phenomenal. And you're learning modern development. You are keeping yourself sharp and your skills sharp, and serverless is where we're going, right? Like this is happened. Like that's where we're all going. If we're as web developers, we're going to serverless. More things to learn: Elastic, Beanstalk. Lambda is sort of the serverless one. It also helps you do a lot of things automatically on AWS. It's kind of an all-purpose coding tool. Route 53, we didn't even get into domains today. That's a whole other, ball of wax that you can get into, all of that, but it's not worth this. And play some bingo. Go on that thing and try to, just learn one of those things and you'll be started on AWS, right? Like don't go in there and get overwhelmed and say there's 150 things. Like people who work all day, every day in AWS, maybe know 10 of them. That's just the reality of it. There's some great, I was hoping this would be better, but don't even look at this, bad. Except the GitHub repositories, this is really awesome. This actually is awesome. There's a bunch of, if you're really into infrastructure as code, this is a lot of examples to get you started on everything. And so that's it. I think I actually made it in time, didn't I? So thank you guys for coming. And I hope you learned something about AWS and you get started on it soon.
Thank you.
Yeah.